Open wide, we're going in. Ah! Hello, everyone. I'm Father Aaron. Welcome to the Dungeon Minister. All right, we're going in to the mouth of the skull. This again is this piece of terrain that I made that was really cool and had a lot of great, response from the boys. You may remember that after they fought the four sort of supercharged skeletons that were on guard here, one of their responses was to try to camp on top of the skull. I don't even, you roll off. But anyway, they decided against that in the end, which is good. I don't have any idea what I would have done if they decided to go ahead with it. Some sort of consequence. But anyway, they decided to pull back away from the skull and camp not quite within sight of it, but also not in the swampy ground that they'd come through earlier. The whole area is a lot more moist, but there's some higher bits here, so they're able to camp, and they do regain some hit points, which is important, because none of them are in great shape. They're all around halfway. They're all in about the mid-range of their hit points, and they're about to go into, well, what reason tells them is a serious encounter, right? So they do as much healing as they can. They all, get some hit points for sleeping overnight, and Touchberry does use his sword the next morning, and he uses it, I think, on Faux Fire because she was brought pretty low in her combat against the super skeleton. So, healed up and ready, in they go. Well, they try. They get to the entrance, and I say, as you approach the mouth of the cave, the literal mouth of the cave, as you approach the mouth of the cave, you feel that cold emanating from it. A cold that they felt while they were fighting the skeletons, that they felt anytime they were in line with that face of the skull. You feel cold emanating out from within. And as you approach, it gets more and more intense. And once they step into the cave, over the teeth, the lower jaw of the skull, once they step in, the cold bites all the way to their bones, all the way to their souls. Yes, this is a supernatural cold, and it is more than just temperature. It's more than just physical. Everyone roll a save against petrification. Okay, everyone makes it. Everyone makes the roll. Except Fleetwood. Hey, it's not Faux Fire this time. At least it's not Faux Fire. She makes the roll with like a 17 or an 18. She smokes it, right? And not so much Fleetwood. I think he rolls a 2. He fails to save. And what happens? He's paralyzed with fear. It's like in an encounter with a mummy. He cannot move. He is rooted to the spot. His friends have to actually physically drag him out of the cave and sit him down outside, where he trembles, eyes wide, almost rocking back and forth, unable to move. Well, great. How long is that going to last? Well, that's a question. I have in the description for the dungeon that it will last 1d10 turns. So I roll it up, and they're lucky. I only roll 3. So we're talking about 30 minutes, half an hour, sitting there waiting for Fleetwood to come around. During that time, Touchberry starts talking about lighting Fleetwood on fire to warm him up. This is just my middle guy messing around at the table, being funny, but we play with it a little bit, understanding that it's sort of, here's the main narrative, and he's sort of taken us over here somewhere, and we just go along and play with it, knowing that he has no actual intention to do it in the main. Anyway, and of course, he, my middle child, has no intention of lighting his actual brother on fire. So we're playing with that, and so when the 30 minutes are up in game time, I say, just as Touchberry turns and says, all right, just for 5 minutes, we'll only have him on fire for 5 minutes, like a compromise has been struck. Finally, Fleetwood shakes himself out of it and looks around and what happened in there, right? He doesn't even really remember. Okay, give him a chance to, put it back together. Let's try that again. In they go. And he fails his roll again. The other three don't have to re-roll. They've already faced it, made the save. No need to re-save every time they go in. But Fleetwood has to roll again because he failed once. He rolls again, and he fails again. He rolls, I don't know, like a 4 or 5 or something. This is ridiculous. And out they go again. They have to drag him out. This time I roll it 7. 70 minutes. All right, this is a bit longer. And they're pacing back and forth, and Touchberry is getting impatient because that's Touchberry for you. Of course, Fofire is perfectly fine to just sit there and wait. Bob Johnny, he'll go with anything. He's fine. So they wait and they wait and they wait and they wait, and Touchberry is again arguing for lighting him on fire. And again, we play with it. It's just silliness. And finally, he shakes himself out of it. Now, at this point, I say we could do this all day. We could do this all day. He could keep going in, keep failing. And so I mentally put in my head, there will be a kill switch. If he fails 3 times in a row, he will never be able to go through this portal. Now, what I will do with the dungeon on the other side of the entrance, I don't know. Well, that'll be up to them. Where will they go if he cannot face this terror, right? So, all right. I should add, without some sort of magical intervention. If he can't go in and then they find some magical intervention, then he could. For instance, a cleric and a bless spell. I'm thinking these things in the back of my head as we're continuing to roleplay, right? Maybe a bless spell would enable him to at least make another saving throw with a bonus or something. But at the moment, we're going in a 3rd time, and he rolls. Oh, thank heavens. Thank heavens, he smokes it. He smokes it. He rolls a 19 or something. He beats it easily. Whew. All right. In you go. Touchberry leads the way, holding a lantern high, and as he holds it, the light casts out onto the rock and somehow is both reflected and absorbed. I say there are glints and shimmerings on this. It is an obsidian. It's a volcanic rock that clearly reflects light, but somehow also swallows it. It's difficult to explain, but the more you shine the light, almost the darker it gets. And for a moment they think, well, we'll just rely on infravision, except A, it's so cold, it would still work, but it would be so cold, but B, Fofire doesn't have infravision, right? And Touchberry only has it because he has that cat's eye marble that he carries with him. So it's not really fair to do that, so in they go with the lantern. It's just the light is so poor. They first find, at the end of the initial corridor, they find a spiral staircase, stone spiral staircase leading down, 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 and down, down, down they go. At the bottom, the corridor goes only a few feet and widens out into a chamber, and they cast their light into the chamber. Here the stone is less this strange obsidian quality. It's more bedrock stone, and so the light doesn't behave in this weird way in this chamber. He casts the light, and there are 3 giant toads. Now, as a side note here, I've got no idea how the toads got down there, right? Like, the toads hopped into the cave. The toads wouldn't be afraid of a big skull. They wouldn't acknowledge it as a skull. Maybe the toads are just too dumb to be paralyzed. I have trouble imagining toads jumping down a spiral staircase and clambering back out, but I'm not going to overthink this, okay? There are 3 giant toads, and actually 2 pretty big toads and 1 enormous toad, because those happen to be the toy toads that I grabbed out of the toy animal box. I'm not paying role-playing game prices for toads that I can grab out of the toy box. So, we have 1 enormous toad, 1 very large toad, and 1 relatively small. It's the 3 bears. It's the 3 toads. This toad is too warty. This toad is too slimy. This toad is just right. Well, the toads are in the room, and they are between the characters and the 2 exits that they can see from the room. There are 2 passages out, and the toads are in the way. What are you going to do here? Well, now, I have mentioned in the past that the boys don't like to kill animals that are just being animals, right? They're happy to kill goblins and orcs and things like that, but when it's a giant toad, the toad has no malice. The toad has no intent to evil, so they're a little squeamish about killing them. Unless the thing attacks them, in which case all bets are off. So they're trying to decide, how do we do this? And Fleetwood says, I'm going to try to calm the toads down. How do you calm a toad down? Anyway, he plays some music for it. So they're going to try to calm the toads down while making their way, and they just randomly pick the passage that's sort of to their left side. So they're making their way over there, and I say, move the miniatures, show me where you are, and they do. And once they get within the toad's jumping distance, comfortable jumping distance, well, it immediately leaps to eat Touchberry because, hey, food just wandered into my home. Of course I'm going to eat it. So the giant toad leaps and attacks and hits. And so Touchberry takes, I don't remember, it was a pretty decent amount of damage. I doubled the damage because this thing's so big that the toad would do in biting. Chomp! And Touchberry tries to get out. He's inside of the mouth of this thing, right? Well, Fleetwood immediately attacks, and Fofire shoots an arrow. It misses, of course, but Fleetwood's sword hits, and that causes the toad to release Touchberry, who immediately stabs at it, all right, and hits. The toad's not doing so well. In comes Bob Johnny with one great boom. Well, they don't like to kill animals, but they're very, very good at it. So down goes the toad. Well, what are the other two going to do, right? They've just seen their, well, presumably husband, father, I don't know what toad society is like. They've just seen one of their members dismembered. What are they going to do about this? Okay, roll a morale on it. I roll a 6, the exact number of their morale. So, do they run away? Do they attack? No. They cower at the other side of the room, but do not attack or flee. They're just going to try to stay away from this group of extraordinarily dangerous food. Okay? And that's what they do. They stay over there, and the party has no desire to go and pursue them. They also don't check the room. I don't put a lot of stuff in here, but there's a handful of coins here and there from perhaps previous adventurers who found their way in and were defeated by these toads or something that came before the toads. Maybe it was food that the toads had found outside, someone that they'd eaten, a goblin or something, and then came in and pooped out the coins. I don't know, but there's a handful. It's nothing much. No big loss. Out they go through the left passage. This hallway, after a quick juke, leads down to an empty chamber. They walk in, examining the room. There are marks on the wall, very faint, carved clearly millennia ago. Difficult to make out, and no visible exit. So the first thing they do, instead of checking for traps, which probably would have been wise, but anyway, they don't do that. The first thing they do is start looking for secret doors. And they say, all right, what are the other two doing? Well, Fofire's going to watch the exit. Touchberry's just going to stand there watching the two elves go to work. And as they go to work, they walk up to the walls. I say checking for traps is going to involve, running your fingers along the walls. And as soon as you make contact with the walls, they scream. Loud, loud, loud. They scream a horrifying, terrifying wail of mourning and lamentation. It is the saddest, most horrific thing you've ever heard. Roll a save versus Death Ray. Okay, now, Death Ray is sort of a catch-all saving throw, and it's the easiest saving throw. So, roll the save versus Death Ray. This time, true to form, Fofire fails the save. So, of the four, she is deafened by this. She can't hear and she can't think. They retreat from the room. They're not even going to bother. They just say, let's leave, pull Fofire out, and they go back to the toad room, right? And there they are in the presence of the toads. Well, how long is this deafness going to last? It doesn't last terribly long. I gave it a 1d4 turns, and I only roll a 1. So about 10 minutes later, Fofire's hearing starts to come back. The idea here was, the save was whether or not you blocked your ears in time. It would deafen you no matter what. But if you got your hands up and you blocked out the sound, you're going to be able to withstand it. It's still piercing and it's still horrible to hear, but it won't deafen you. Well, Faux Fire was, maybe she had a bow and arrow, right? She had her bow in her hand and her arrow, watching to see if those toads were coming. Something. She didn't get her hands up in time. Fair enough. After the deafness passes, they decide they are not going to go back there again. They're just, nope, not going in that room, which is interesting. I mean, there is a secret door. I won't tell you. You know what? Maybe they'll go back someday. At any rate, they don't this time. They decide to try the other door. Now, the toads, in their absence, the toads have moved further down into the room away from where they went because the toads are afraid of them. So they have no problem getting through. This passage and the room it leads to are actually mirrors of the other side. So a little bit of a juke in the corridor, and in it goes to a large chamber which appears empty. However, in this chamber, there are exits visible, 4 of them. Spaced around the wall, there are 4 ways out. There is also, about 10 feet in, I use a grid system on my tiles, so this becomes very easy. There is also a row of letters. And the floor is divided into large slabs, and on each of these 4 slabs across the room, 5 foot by 5 foot slabs, on each one is a letter. Now, I had considered making special tiles for this. I actually had cut the tile, I'd gotten it all ready, I hadn't done any painting, I'd done the stone texturing, everything, made the grid, and I was about to start carving letters in when I thought, no, for 2 reasons. 1, this would be a special tile that I would never use again. 2, I didn't want them to be able to see all the letters to begin with, right? So the idea is that as you look across, if you are right in front of the tiles, you can see down and see the letters carved there. But they're carved so shallow and so broad, so wide and so shallow that looking across, you really don't detect them. They don't show up as letters. They're very difficult to read, and so you can't see the next row. Essentially, I didn't want them to look at this puzzle and figure it out without any risk, right? I needed them to be risking things as they figured it out. So here it is, 4 letters across, and it gets H, an O, a C, and an M, okay? And so first, Hockham. What's Hockham? Okay, no, Hockham. What does this mean? And they begin to try to analyze the puzzle. Well, actually, Touchberry and Bob Johnny just drop out. They're like, no, I have no idea. Fleetwood, though. Fleetwood leans over the table, and he keeps asking Faux Fire, what does this mean? Do you think it means this? Do you think it means that? And bless my wife, she's being very indulgent. I don't know what it could mean. She's doing her knitting, Fleetwood took forever. He put on his, detective cap, and he was going to figure this thing out. Eventually, he has to admit that there's no pattern he can see to these 4 letters. Then they think, hey, Faux Fire, can you check for traps on these? Can you check to see if there's any traps? Now, there's a 55% chance that she'll find the trap. If she doesn't find the trap, she doesn't find the trap, but she doesn't know that she's failed. The DM rolls, right? So she says, I'll check all 4 of these tiles. All right, you start at the H, and I roll, and I actually get a success, but there's no trap on the H. So I say, you don't find anything there. Okay, the O, and I roll, and she succeeds. She gets under 55. I get under 55 for her. Yes, there seem to be hinges on the far edge of the trap, but you don't see any mechanism that would release this piece. You don't see any mechanism to release it. It's just the hinges. The reason is it's a magical trap. It's a magical physical trap, right? It's a physical trap with a magical trigger, I guess. Anyway, you go to the next one, and I roll, and she fails the check. You don't see any hinges on this one. Okay, the M, and she actually succeeds. You don't see any hinges on this one either. So as far as they know, the H, the C, and the M are safe, right? The O has hinges. I wonder why those 3. Well, let's try one. Now, Touchberry is about to step on the C when suddenly he gets an idea. I want to go and drag the toad in. Let's go get the body of the toad and throw it on the tile and see if it, Okay. So they go back to the toad room where the other two toads have now left. And they get the toad and they drag it in and said, okay, let's heave it onto this tile. And so they heave it in and shove it out onto the tile, and nothing happens. And nothing happens because, again, it is a magical trigger. This is a dead animal. It's not going to happen, right? Okay. So Touchberry then says, I'm going to jump up on the toad and jump up and down on it to see if anything happens. Okay. Now, here I have to think we've got a toad that is larger than 5 feet by 5 feet, at least the miniature is, and I'm sort of going with that is the size of the creature. So it's bigger than the hole, but it's a toad. It's not, a rigid thing, and it's probably not been long enough for rigor mortis to set in. It's there. It could slump through, right? Especially with a halfling in chainmail armor bouncing up and down on top of it. All right, we'll give it a 50-50 chance. 50% chance the toad plugs the hole and nothing happens. Because it is trapped. The trap releases but the toad gets stuck. 50% chance of that. 50% it goes through. What do I roll? Oh, down goes the toad, and down goes the halfling who's jumping up and down on top of it. Wah! And he falls. He falls a good 15 feet into a pit of the exact same dimensions as the one he's just left. How much damage is he going to take? Well, he only sustains a single point of damage. And I say, you know why that is? You landed on the toad. There's your explanation for why you only took 1 point of damage. You were braced for it, and you landed on the toad. As he lands on the toad with a disgusting squelch, he looks around the room, and I say it's dark down here. There's no light at all, but he's got the cat's eye marble, and so in the cold of this room, in this whole place, even though it's not as cold as the entry, it's still deathly cold down here. In the cold, you see something moving across the room. Well, what shape is it? Like human shaped? Is it? No. No, it's only slightly warmer than the air around it, and it's just sort of a blob of some kind. An ochre jelly. An ochre jelly begins oozing its slow way across the room, and so Touchberry starts yelling and hollering, get me out of here, get me out of here, get me out of here! By the time the rope is lowered and the party up top are ready to haul him, and he grabs on, he starts hauling himself out, the ochre jelly has begun feasting on the dead toad. This will actually come in handy later. But for now, Touchberry is back up, and they're stuck, because what they thought was safe is not safe, and so now they don't know what to trust. Okay? Now, we know the O has hinges. We don't know if the M or the H do. Well, what do? We just have to pick one. And so at this point, Fleetwood says, look, I want to tie the rope around my waist, and I'll go. I'll step on the next tile. Which, safety first. I have in the back of my head that it might happen that if he falls, the rest of the party aren't actually ready for it. All of them may get pulled in, or they may loose, their grip on the rope and may go through. So I have that in mind. This is Fleetwood's rope, by the way, that they've been using. So Fleetwood goes to the H. All right. I step on the H. Nothing happens. Aha. Nothing happens. Now, from the H, he can see the next letters. All right? He can see the next letters, and he says, all right, this one is safe. Fofire, come out and check these that I can now see, the 3 adjoining it that were not visible from back there, the one next to it, the one in front of it, and the one to the diagonal. Look at those. And she examines those, and she says, I know that the E doesn't have one, the other 2 have hinges. She's actually found, she succeeded in finding, but they don't know if she's right. So again, very cautiously steps onto the E. Okay, that holds up. H-E. Wonder if it spells something. And he looks at the letters around, and they start to work this out. And again, Fofire goes out and checks, and she finds some with hinges, some without. But on about half of the ones that she doesn't find hinges on, she's wrong. There actually more than half. There actually are hinges. So she comes back and she says, these are the safe ones. And he decides on the R. H-E-R. Hey, and around the table, oh, I bet it spells heroes. Heroes of Honeywood. It's not big enough to do that, but anyway. Heroes, maybe. Oh, that'd be great, Not heroes, no. No. You're standing now on the R, and that appears safe. Let's look around. Again, Fofire comes out, and she discovers the ones that are safe, or that she thinks are safe. The ones that she thinks are safe are the B and the E. There's a B right in front of, so you go H-E-R, and right in front of the R is a B. She thinks that's safe. And the E over to the side she thinks is safe. Okay. Fleetwood says, okay, H-E-R-E, here. I'll step on the E. And so they start talking it over. Yeah, I'll probably say something like here this way, or here's the treasure, or here's the exit, or something, right? They're talking this over. And you're working, okay, you have the rope. Okay, we'll stand over on this spot with the rope. Okay. And he forgets the E and steps on the B. Down goes Fleetwood, and he falls, and I have to roll the dice now because I said mentally there's a chance that the party either loses grip or gets pulled with. Now, if they get pulled with, they'll get pulled onto tiles, some of which may give way, right? So I've got percentages in mind. What do I roll? I roll. They lose their grip on it. They've had so many successes. They're kind of casual about it now. Yeah, we'll hold the rope. Don't worry. He steps on the B. Down he goes, and the rope goes after him. Now, he is in the pit with the ochre jelly. Again, this is okay because the ochre jelly is busy feasting on the corpse of the toad, and it's going to take it some time, right? It's not a light snack. So the ochre jelly is busy, and Fleetwood, he sustains about 4 points of damage or something, which, because they're not in great shape, is not a good thing. But anyway, he sustains a few points of damage, and now he's hollering up at the opening, "Get me out of here! Get me out here before it's done with the toad!" And then he's like, okay, how do I get out? Because I've got the rope, right? Oh, I'll attach something heavy to the rope, and I'll throw the rope up, and maybe you can catch it. And first he's going to try his dagger. That's not heavy enough to pull the whole rope. I mean, you're 15 feet down. 15 feet of rope weighs more than a dagger, right? Oh, what do I have that I can throw? And he's going through all this stuff. And then Fofire says, I have a rope. You're not the only one here with rope. I've got rope. And she lowers her rope down and pulls Fleetwood back out. Okay, go to the E. How's that? And he steps on the E, and it is, in fact, weight-bearing. Okay. Here. What are the next letters I can see? One of the next letters you can see is an M. And suddenly an idea begins to form in Fleetwood's mind. Heremod. I'll bet it spells Heremod. And indeed it does. He goes to the M, and it is safe. And then they still check the tiles, but then there's an O, and then there's a D. Now, as they've been going, they've been passing other doors. I mean, they're not at them. They're not at the wall. They've been passing other doorways, 2 of them. And I say, as you look past these, if you stop and look at these other doorways, you see they only go in about 5-10 feet. They're dummies. There's nothing there. But as you get further into the room, you look over and there are 2 doors. One of them has a short passage with a doorway at the end of it. The other, you don't see the end of. And Heremod is leading toward that one. Well, those are the ones we know are safe, so let's keep going, and that's where they go. And as they step into the corridor after walking Heremod, they hear a voice. You have walked in the name of your Lord. And no, we didn't. We stepped on his name with our grubby, muddy feet. But the voice doesn't care. It's, pre-recorded. Anyway, into the corridor they go. Now they have a sense of foreboding. What have they gotten themselves into? And well, they should. The corridor leads in and curves around and comes to this. A large chamber, in the center of which is a dais, on top of which is a sort of ostensorium, where green light pours out with a mist and smoke. Suspended in the middle of the smoke, magically suspended, is an orb, twirling in the light and smoke. Okay. The room is dark. Their lantern light barely pierces it, but there is this mysterious green light pulsing from the ostensorium itself. In they walk. As soon as they step into the room, torches all around the edge flare up with green fire. We've seen this before in the Tomb of the White, the Tomb of Heremod. They flare up in green fire, but these do not illuminate. The torches light up and cast darkness. The only thing that can be seen is the green of the flame itself, flickering and spreading dark. Dark that their lantern does not pierce at all. The only light they can actually see is the sources themselves, including this glowing light from the ostensorium. An ostensorium is an object used to display saints' relics or the Blessed Host. I'm adopting it here for this dark religion as well. At any rate, this and the sconces are the only sources of light, but they're just pinpricks of light that spread darkness. This means Fofire is out. She cannot see anything. And so they shutter the lantern to give full rein to their infravision, because of course the two elves and Touchberry, because of his cat's eye marble, have infravision. What do we see? Cold. Cold. Desperate, deep cold. But rising from the ostensorium, through the smoke, and passing directly through the orb that is hovering there, comes a deeper center of cold. It is vaguely human-shaped, but there's no definition to it. At its edges, it just bleeds off further into cold. It is almost the source of the cold in the room, or perhaps it has been vomited forth from the source of cold, and instantly the boys know it's a wraith. Roll for initiative. Well, the wraith outrolls them, and down it sweeps. Now, a wraith is not it's not a mindless zombie or skeleton or something. It's a clever creature. It knows that the two elves are probably its biggest threat, and so it's going to attack one of them, Fleetwood. It attacks Fleetwood, swooping down. It envelops him in its cold and mist. I say you feel cut to the very core. It's reminiscent of the cold you felt at the entrance, and as it pulls away from you, it pulls away with some of your strength, some of your energy. You are now a 4th level elf. And you lose... you're going to go down 6 hit points, in addition to the damage it does, so you're going to go down a total of 12. Now... this isn't good for our Fleetwood, because our Fleetwood was already coming down. He suffered a fall. I don't know if I mentioned the damage he took in the fall, but he took damage in the fall. He'd taken damage out fighting those skeletons. He gets down to a grand total of 2. 2 hit points. I'm out, he says, and he runs back into the corridor as Bob Johnny lets loose a lightning bolt. Now, the lightning bolt sears into the wraith, and Bob Johnny rolls his dice for damage. 16. 16 is what he gets for damage. Not terribly impressive. Does the wraith make his save? Oh yeah, the wraith makes his save. Takes 8 points of damage. There's a piercing scream, though, as it takes this damage. Touchberry runs up with his sword, thrusts it in. It's a magic sword, so it can hit, and he does like 5 points of damage. It's not actually that hard to hit a wraith. They don't have a great AC. He thrusts it in, he does 5 or 6 points of damage. Nothing huge, but it's something, and again, the piercing scream. Now, the wraith retaliates. Remember, Fofire can do nothing. She would be just as likely to hit one of her friends as she would be to hit the wraith, right? So the wraith swoops toward Bob Johnny. All right, roll for the attack for the wraith. Oh! Bob Johnny sidesteps as the thing goes by and fires magic missile into it. 3 missiles appear and streak into the wraith, hitting. Boom, 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 right? And it takes another bunch of damage. It screeches again and whirls around. Touchberry's out of range. He can't get to it. There's no way he can run around because the thing's on the other side. But Fleetwood, although he has run out of the combat into, melee, he's still there. And he says, I'm going to shoot a magic missile. All right, roll for damage. He grabs 3 dice. I say, no, put 2 of those down. You're 4th level now. Oh, he rolls a dice. It does a few points of damage. It's nothing to sneeze at. Streaks in, the wraith is furious. I actually roll morale for the wraith, but wraiths don't really like to run away. They got an 11 morale. He's not going anywhere. He swoops back in at Bob Johnny. Is he going to hit? Ooh, no, he escapes by the skin of his teeth. He escapes as the wraith goes by. Bob Johnny swings out with the axe, but misses. He just goes wide, misses the thing, on to Touchberry, who slashes and hits for a few more points. There, the Wraith decides to attack Touchberry. Now, at this point, Fleetwood is out of spells. He still would have a magic missile, but he doesn't fire it for whatever reason. I'm staying in here out of trouble. The Wraith envelops Touchberry. Touchberry is now a 5th level halfling, and he loses, it's 7 hit points or something like that. He goes down because you lose those hit points you gain for that level. He's then surrounded, and as he lets go, and you feel your strength and your energy pulled away from you as this thing rises up. But then Bob Johnny fires his other 3 magic missiles right into the back of it, and it dissipates into cloud and darkness and shadow. And as it goes, the sconces die, and normal darkness fills the room.